this country a better place. That is why we cannot sit by and sit silent as this administration attempts to rid this from its rightful place in history. We cannot do that, because if they can get rid of this building, what is next? There are several historical civil rights markers and buildings across this country that we must preserve. That is why Congresswoman Sewell and I will be presenting legislation that prevents this sort of thing from happening again without congressional approval. We cannot sit by and allow a rogue administration to attempt to erase history, especially history that is so personal to me, because this was part of the movement that ultimately led to a Voting Rights Act, that ultimately led to the seats that Congresswoman Sewell and I now occupy. We have to stand up for Montgomery, we have to stand up for our history, and we have to stand up for this bus station with the same resolve that John Lewis and the Freedom Riders in 1961 stood up for America. Thank you.
It is my honor to present the House Democratic Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, my brother from Brooklyn.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here with Representative Terry Sewell, my sister, an incredible civil rights champion, an incredible member of Congress, and to be joined by the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Alabama, the congressman representing this very district, Shamari Figurs, who's off to a tremendous start. And we look forward to our continued partnership and the continued leadership of Terry Sewell and Shamari Figurs. I'm thankful that they quickly sprung into action to make sure that this incredibly important museum, the Freedom Rides Museum, is protected from the type of reckless tyranny being unleashed by some in Washington to try to erase our history. Our civil rights history is not for sale. The progress of the civil rights movement is not for sale. The struggle that the civil rights movement represented to bring about a more perfect union is not for sale. And we are committed to standing behind the Freedom Rides Museum, standing behind this monument, and elevating the incredibly important history that it represents. We've come a long way in America, but we still have a way to go. That's evident by the events that are unfolding day after day in Washington, D.C. This is an incredibly important weekend in the United States of America as we commemorate here in Alabama the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. We're thankful for what the courage and character and conviction of heroes like John Lewis represented that day. And we are determined to channel that courage, channel that character, channel that conviction to both protect the gains that were made by the civil rights movement as represented by the Freedom Rides Museum, the sacrifice of those brave civil rights foot soldiers and freedom riders who fought for an America that could be the best version of herself. We will never walk away from that effort, and we will do everything we need to do to protect the history and legacy of the civil rights movement.
I want to thank Leader Jeffries for joining Representative Figurs and I in this very important press conference. We want the world to know that we are not going to stand by and let this chaotic Trump administration's efforts to erase our history continue. And I want to thank you, Leader Jeffries. I know you came here for the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, but none of us, we were all surprised when we found out on Friday that this building, once a Greyhound bus station where freedom riders started their freedom ride from Montgomery all across the South to make sure that African Americans could ride and to test our inner commerce efforts and the freedoms that we now enjoy. And so to everyone, I just want you all to know that we haven't heard back from GSA or from the Trump administration with our letter, but we did send our letter out on Friday. With that, we'll open it up for questions about this particular situation.
So you mentioned that y'all are going to present legislation to prevent something like this happening, without approval. Can you tell us more about that, what that entails?
Yeah, so we discussed this together just over the course of this weekend, and I think generally what that's going to look like, and we'll go back to Washington and draft it out, but what that's going to look like is when a building that has this historical significance, particularly civil rights historical significance, a building that this country has determined its historical significance by virtue of placing it on a national register of historical monuments, no single authority should be able to dispose of that. And so we would require it, or I believe the language that we will ultimately settle on will require congressional approval before a building can be sold that has received that designation already.
Thank you.
I had a question for Mr. Jeffries. What are your concerns, I guess, with the precedent that this may set should the current administration actually carry through with this?
Well, it's incredibly important that we protect and preserve our history to provide us with a North Star for where we need to go to make this country the best that it can possibly be at a time when you have people connected to this administration in Washington, the Trump administration, who want to turn back the clock. But we're committed to moving the country forward, to bringing people together, and the only way to do that is to make sure that we actually respect and understand our history, our journey as a nation, and the role of the civil rights movement.
I think that this actually shows that progress that we see in this country is elusive, and every generation has to fight to hold on to the progress that we've made and to try to advance it, lest we risk the losing it. And so I think that what you're seeing is an attempt by this administration to whitewash our history, and we're not going to take it. This is not just a black history. This is American history. It's important Alabama history. And we as Alabamians should be outraged by the efforts of this administration to try to sell the Greyhound bus station where our Freedom Riders started their journey. And so, I'm just delighted that our leader would take time out of his schedule and his time here in Alabama to stand with us. I think this shows a united front when it comes to our efforts to make sure that landmarks like this remain. It's not for sale. Our history, our black history, our American history is not for sale.
And should that GSA website come back up and this museum is still on that list, what do you guys think is your immediate next step?
We'll continue to fight. I think that what we've seen is that in the face of this administration's chaotic efforts, public sentiment does matter. And so it's press conferences like today. It's making sure that citizens in Alabama understand what's going on. Citizens in our districts understand what's going on. And I believe that public sentiment will be on our side when it comes to landmark civil rights sites such as this. As the leader said, we are a country in search of being a more perfect union. And as Martin Luther King said, the arc of the universe bends towards justice, but it doesn't bend by itself, right? It bends by the courage and sacrifices of others, folks like our Freedom Riders. That's worthy of this story being told and making sure that we preserve it for future generations. I think that we're all taking a playbook out of John Lewis and those freedom fighters. They were tacticians, they were strategists, they just didn't happen upon Selma. What happened here in Montgomery just didn't happen. I believe that we can take a page from that playbook, and in times of chaos like this, see their roadmap as a form of action for us to take.
And I'll add to that, as the Congresswoman just alluded to, the pushback works. It works to amplify the issue. It works to highlight the issue. It works to bring light to the ridiculous nature and the reckless nature of some of the decisions that this administration is making. We pushed back when the Tuskegee Airmen had been pulled from the training curriculum, and that was resolved. We pushed back when we heard that 1890 land-grant college scholarships had been paused, which the 1890 schools are the HBCUs, but the 1862 land-grant colleges, which are the non-HBCUs, that funding had not been paused. We were able to get a temporary victory there, and we just, found out a little earlier this week that there's a separate issue there that we have to continue to push back on. So the pushback works. This works to highlight what's going on in this administration, and we're going to push back until we can win on this one.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that this building was actually bought by GSA through an effort that was both state and federal. Our state historic society, and then federally, our federal court systems, led by then Chief Judge Myron Thompson, who is now a senior judge here in Montgomery, thought it was very important that we not let this bus station go be sold privately, but rather make it this museum that you see today. And so I look forward to welcoming Leader Jeffries back in the years ahead to come and see the exhibits that are here at this museum.
One more from me. For people who are concerned, upset, want to get involved, what's your message to them? What can they do to maybe have some sort of input?
We want the public to know that we're just 2 of the 7 representatives, House representatives here in Alabama. We have 2 senators. We'd love for them to make sure that they are calling our senators and expressing their concern and alarm by this. After all, our 2 senators have a hotline to the White House. We want them to use it to actually help us preserve the history that is here. It's everyone's history, and so we would love for our senators to see the importance it has for America as well as Alabama history.
Yeah, civil rights history is not simply black history. It's not Democratic history or Republican history. It's Alabama history and American history. And it's important for every elected representative in this state and across the country to fight hard to preserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.